Good morning. Jason Duhamel here from Smoky J's Barbecue in Mattoon, Illinois. Today we're going to talk about spare ribs. I'm going to cook this rack of spare ribs on my Traeger smoker today, and I wanted to kind of go over, the anatomy of a spare rib and how I like to trim them. This is a full rack of spares. You can see it's got the rib tip still on it. Membrane's been on it. Pretty much all I've done is take this out of the package and rinsed it off and dried it. So you're going to need your cutting board, a couple sharp knives, a small one, large one, paper towel. So the first thing I like to do is take this piece of meat on the back here. It's a flap, and cut it completely off. So you just cut it as close to the bones as you can, just like that. And what I like to do with this piece of meat is I like to go ahead and smoke it at the same time I do the ribs, and I will use this in my baked beans or anything that I might want to add a little extra smoked meat to. So I'll actually freeze that and add it later to some meat. So this is the back side of your rib here. This is where the membrane's at, and we're going to cut the membrane off and take the membrane off in just a minute. But right now we're going to trim these St. Louis style, and I like to trim them St. Louis style. Not only it's a great presentation. Number one, it makes it look a lot better. It allows me to cook the rib tips separately, and I do some competitions, so I'm always used to cooking St. Louis style because the actual cut of the rib makes it look more presentable. It's a prettier looking rib. You don't have to do that. You can cook this rack full if you choose to. That's perfectly fine, and just cut the rib tips off, or actually make rib cuts and have full ribs. But I'm going to take the tips off. So what I do here is, what I'm trying to do is find the spot where the bone meets, turn up here, find a spot where the bone meets the tip. You can feel a little open spot in there. And once I find that, I'll take my large knife and I'll go ahead and make a cut. And what I'm basically doing is just cutting these tips off. So see, once I found the smooth spot, it'll go straight through, and we'll be able to separate the rib tips. Don't really have a big enough cutting board here, but alright, so we're getting them off. See how they're coming off easily there? I'm going to move this down the cutting board a little bit so I can get this last piece off. And once you find that good spot, they'll come right off. I mean, it looks like I'm struggling a little bit. I'm not. I'm just got a small cutting board. So, alright, so these are your rib tips. And actually, this is a good cut of meat too. I'll cook it at the same time. It's just got the little, as you can see, it's got the little cartilage, the little rib tips and everything in there that aren't necessarily, pretty. So I'm going to set this aside. So now we're going to talk about the membrane. Membrane is this white piece on the back side of your ribs. Goes all the way down. And that needs to be taken off. Number one, you won't get rubbed into your rib like you want to. And number two, you won't get the smoke penetration like you want to. And no matter how long you cook this membrane is not going to disappear. It's going to be there. It's actually going to shrink up, and it will get crusty. So what we'll do is, a lot of people use needle nose pliers. They'll use all kinds of different stuff. What I like to do, and I'm going to turn it this way because I'm right-handed. What I like to do is just take this little knife, just get underneath the membrane. As I'm getting underneath it, I'm turning it like this. And I just want to get enough that I can get a hold of. Once I do that, I can take, move this out of the way, I can take an actual paper towel, because it's dry, give me something to grip on, hold the end of the ribs, grab a hold of the membrane, and it should come off fairly easy in one piece. Just like that. So as you can see, this is a pretty tough, stretchy kind of piece of leather-like material that you definitely want off your rib. And we're going to just throw that away. There's no use for that. So now the only thing left to do is to trim off all these little extra pieces here. You know, we got this extra piece of meat, you know, hanging on the edge here. It's mostly fat, so we'll probably throw that away. A little bit of silver skin. Silver skin's just like a fatty skin. Other than that, these ribs look pretty good. I mean, there's not a whole lot of fat. We can check the backside. A little bit of fat here. Get all that trimmed off. Make sure you got your flap off, and you do. I do, excuse me. Okay, so that is St. Louis style rib. As you can see, it's nice and rectangular shape, so when we cook it, we'll be able to cut right down these ribs, and we'll have uniform ribs all the way through. The backside is the membrane's off, the flap is off of it, and you have a nice uniform set of ribs. We have left is this small flap that was on there, and you can cook this up and use it for addition to beans or whatever kind of meat you might want to add it to. And then actually this rack of ribs has a huge set of rib tips, and this is a lot of meat in here. So I'm going to smoke it at the same time that I do my my rack of St. Louis style, but I'll get these done and have a little bit more extra rib meat. So that's all I have for now. We'll talk later when I start to rub it, and I'll start preparing the smoker. I'm going to cook this on my Traeger Lone Star, and we'll get it started, and then we'll show how my process of doing this. Just keep in mind that I've been cooking ribs for 11 years, but this will be my first set of ribs on my new Traeger pellet smoker. Been using Weber Smoky Mountains my entire cooking career, and I've got this recently got this pellet smoker, so it's going to be a learning for all of us here. I'm just kind of learning how to actually do it on a pellet smoker. I'm going to try it the same way I would do it on a Weber. I'm going to do it with 3 hours in the smoke. I'm going to foil it for an hour, and then I'm going to open it up, sauce it, and take another hour. That's a little modification from the 3-2-1 method. 3-2-1 method, of course, is 3 hours smoke, 2 hours foil, 1 hour sauced. On my Weber, I can cut that second 2 hours down to just a single hour, and we'll see if I'll be able to do that. I should be able to tell when it's time to do that. So I'll check back in with you later. Thanks. I've got my my rib tips and my rack of St. Louis style spare ribs. Been trimmed nicely. I have my rub right here. This is my rub. It's one that I've made. It's sugar, salt, brown sugar, cumin, paprika, onion powder, garlic powder. There's a lot of stuff in there. It took me a while to figure this rib out. It took me a while, excuse me. It took me a while to figure this rub out, how exactly I want it, and I kind of got it the way I want it now. So you can use any sort of commercial rib rub, commercial pork rub on these ribs without having to worry about it. I just have my own rub that I like. So next thing we're going to need is yellow mustard. Just simple yellow mustard. And the reason why you use yellow mustard is these ribs have been trimmed and rinsed and dried. The mustard's going to put something on that rib, a surface for that rub to adhere to. So as it cooks, the mustard's going to render away, and the rub's going to create what they call the bark. And that's going to be the little crusty outside of the rib. So yellow mustard is what I've always used. So first thing we're going to do is apply a pretty liberal coat of mustard to the surface of the tips and the ribs. I just got some on my hands here, so give me a second. Now, my favorite thing for spreading this out is to make things easy for the home cook. This is a butter knife, the one with the little angle there. I use these mostly because you can just kind of lay them flat, and you can get a nice even spread of the mustard without getting your hands all dirty. So I'm going to spread this mustard out, and then you can use it as a, kind of like a scraper if you've got too much mustard in one spot, not enough in the other. So that's what you do there, and then I'll go ahead and do the rib tips too, and then this little piece of fatty meat that I cut off the back, the flap I call it. So we're going to get these nice and spread evenly. I like to prepare my ribs probably at least an hour before I'm going to cook them to give that rub a chance to permeate and kind of sink into the meat a little bit. But my personal opinion is I don't like to do it much more than 5 or 6 hours before I'm going to cook it, just because if you let that rub sit on overnight, say 8, 10, 12 hours before you cook it, ribs is a fairly thin cut of meat, and you don't want to get that kind of ham flavor or that cured flavor on it by letting the rub sit too much. You don't want to draw all the moisture out, because the salt in your rub is going to draw the moisture out of the ribs, and you don't want to draw it all out. So I like to do it at least an hour, and that's about where I'm at now. It's 11:20, so I hopefully have them on by 12:30. So, all right, that's all done. I'll stop messing with that. So I'm just going to liberally sprinkle my rub on there, and I'm just going to let it sit. I'm not going to rub it in. I'm just going to let it sit, and that's what that hour's for. That hour's for this rub to mix with that mustard and the moisture in the meat and actually start turn into a little bit of a liquid. So there's the rib tips are done. We're going to do the main rib here. Pretty liberal with this rub. Make sure you get the whole meat coated. And then what you're going to do is after I get it coated, I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm not going to rub it in. I'm not going to shake it off. I'm just going to let it do its job. I'm going to let the rub absorb itself into the rib and let it turn to like a liquefy pretty much. It's gonna be drawing juices out of the ribs. So leave her alone. Get all those little edges. Okay. So that's done. So now I'm gonna let it sit for about an hour, refrigerated preferably. And everybody's probably asking, but you didn't rub the backside of the rib, and I don't. I've always been the way I've always cooked my ribs. I've never really rubbed or sauced the backside of the rib. I want my surface of my rib to look good, and I want it to bark up, and I don't want to mess with the bottom part of it, because the bottom part of it, you're not going to get much taste off of that per se, because when you're biting a rib, you're biting right from the top. So as long as I get that membrane off to allow that heat and smoke to permeate through the bottom of the rib, I don't need to put any rub on it, my opinion. I know a lot of people do it different ways, and that's okay, but that's the way I do it. So we're going to let this sit for an hour, get the smoker preheated. I'm going to start the smoker on 225. I'm using lumberjack hickory pellets, and we'll see how it goes. So I'll check back in when. Okay, so here's my ribs here. Trying to get a good close-up view. They've been sitting for about 30 minutes, maybe a little less. And as I said before, you can see that rub starting to liquefy, actually permeate into the meat. And, there's not much hint of the mustard left. So, I think that's very interesting, the way it permeates into the meat. So, next video I will be taking them out to the smoker and getting them ready to cook. So, just wanted to show you what the meat looks like right before I put it on. Okay, so we're out here on my deck. This is my grilling area. Got a little awning out here. This is my Traeger smoker, Traeger Lone Star. Right now I have it preheated. It's set on 225, and I'm running about 250 right now. There's no meat on it. So I'm going to put the ribs on now. I expect to cook them 3 hours. Don't even look at them for the first 3 hours at 225, and then I'll wrap them in foil for an hour to two, depending on what I decide. Like I said before, we're using lumberjack 100% hickory pellets. These are 100%, so that should give it a good hickory flavor. So we're just going to put these on the smoker, and then we'll check back. All right, they are on. I'll check back with you in about 3 hours. Okay, so it's been 3 hours. They've been on the Traeger 225. I'm going to open them up, let you take a look at them, then we're going to wrap them in foil and cook them for another hour. See what they look like. Alright, they're looking real good. Those are the rib tips in the back there. Regular rack in the front. We'll wrap them in foil now. I'll seal them up nice and tight. Double wrap them in foil, make sure you get it completely sealed up. and we'll put them back on the smoker for another hour. And I'll check back in with you, and what we'll do is we'll open them up, we'll sauce them really good, and let the sauce set. So, looking pretty good, smelling really good. Check back in after I get them in foil. What's up, guys? We're back. A little bit of rain started. So the ribs have been on 3 hours in the smoke. I wrapped them in foil. They've been on an hour in the foil. It's 4 hours total right now. I'm going to open up the foil, and I'm going to sauce it. And then I'm just going to leave the foil open and just kind of let the sauce sit on there, probably for another hour. So this is about a 5 hour cook process. Today I'm using, you can't really see it, this is Famous Dave's Sweet and Zesty. It's one of my favorite sauces to use. It's got a little bit of heat, a lot of sweet. It complements my rub very well, that's why I use it. So what I'm going to do is I'll just open these ribs up. They look good. As I open them up, look, you can tell they pulled apart from the bone, so that's good. We're going to sauce them really good if I can get the sauce open. We'll sauce them really well, and then let them sit for another hour. And then we'll see what we have after that. Pretty simple recipe. Some of the sauces I like to use, like I said, Famous Dave's Sweet and Zesty is one of the ones. I also like Blues Hog a lot. Blues Hog is a little more difficult to find around here, but when I can't find Blues Hog or I don't have it, I use Famous Dave's. And you can also use Sweet Baby Ray's is a good brand. I like the hickory brown sugar, and I like the sweet and spicy. So, all right, well, we got these sauced. We'll let them cook another hour, and then next time I see you, I will have them on a platter, and we'll see what they look like when I cut them. Okay, here they are. So the final thing was 3 hours in the smoke. I wrapped them in foil, double wrapped for an hour, and then I opened them up and sauced them, and it was about 45 minutes on that. They got maybe a little dark on one end, but the sauce set really nice, and it's actually caramelized on there, which is awesome. That's the way I wanted. As you can see right here, the meat's pulling away from the bone, which is a good sign that they're done. I'm going to let them cool, and then I'm going to cut them. But that'll be the end of this video. If you have any comments for me, any questions, feel free to post it down below, and I'll answer them as quick as I can. So, thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate it. Smokey's Days Barbecue out.